US President Donald Trump is urging Iran to make a nuclear deal or risk a new US attack far worse than the last one. His threat follows the arrival of the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier and other warships to the Middle East. The US military deployed the convoy from the South China Sea to the Arabian Sea, with fighter jets also present in the region. Now, Iran's UN mission in New York responded to Washington's announcement on X, writing, "Last time the US blundered into wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, it squandered over $7 trillion and lost more than 7,000 American lives. Iran stands ready for dialogue based on mutual respect and interests. But if pushed, it will defend itself and respond like never before." Let's speak now to Behnam. Taleblu is a senior director of the Iran program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Good to have you back with us on DW. Has the probability of U.S. military action against Iran increased in recent days?
Pleasure to be with you. Certainly, it looks like that based on the array of firepower that the United States has brought into the CENTCOM area of responsibility. I mean, make no mistake, there was a time previously where there were 2 carriers in the Persian Gulf, but there's also been times where there's been 0. And now the return of this firepower under the term of a president who, in his first term, pulled the trigger against Iran's chief terrorist, Qasem Soleimani, and in his second term was willing to pull the trigger against their crown jewel of the regime's nuclear program, certainly adds credibility behind that firepower as well. But you know better than I, in addition to being commander-in-chief, the current president is also negotiator-in-chief. And his most recent tweet or statement on social media still expressed some kind of a hope for negotiations, a negotiation which I would say would be making a deal with a blood-soaked hand.
What would that kind of deal look like?
So in my view, there is no diplomatic off-ramp, or there is no nuclear deal to be had, not just with this regime, but in particular at this current juncture, given the fact that Donald Trump drew a red line not once, not twice, but spoke about Iran and holding the government accountable for the crackdown 8 or 9 times in the month of January 2026 alone. And therefore, there is no way to pivot and avert this by focusing on the nuclear issue, particularly when one reason why, in response to all of Trump's threats, Iran can't make a nuclear weapon is because Trump took away that option for them in June of 2025 through Operation Midnight Hammer. So that's why what this deal would contain, if there was going to be such a deal, would probably have a lot of promissory notes, promises not to enrich uranium, promises to forswear reprocessing of plutonium, promises to limit the range or the number of Iranian missiles, and promises to pull the plug on transnational terrorism and the axis of resistance. But those promises aren't going to be worth the paper they're written on. And
so if the U.S. were to intervene, what kind of measure do you think would be most likely?
This is the million-dollar question right now. President Trump himself referred to Venezuela in that most recent tweet or Truth Social post that was mentioned previously. I, for one, don't think that we can apply the Venezuela model, as it were, to the Islamic Republic. They're 2 fundamentally different countries, 2 fundamentally different geographies, 2 fundamentally different military capabilities in the hands of each actor. So I think that does mean that the president, if he's going to be effective, is going to have to go big or go home. Now, one country that we haven't spoken about here yet is not America or Iran, but rather Israel, and how they may actually see the potential for this campaign, and if they'll pick up where the 12-day war left off and have a division of labor between the targeting of what the U.S. will go after with its political goals and what the Israelis would go after with their political goals. But make no mistake, any operation that does not level the playing field between the state and the street, that does not help Iranian protesters, would be counterproductive.
Meanwhile, Iran is threatening to respond, quote, like never before if there were, in the event of a U.S. attack. How seriously should that be taken?
I do believe it should be taken seriously in response to those 2 historic strikes that I mentioned from the Trump administration in January 2020, when the U.S. killed Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. The Iranians responded with what was then the biggest ballistic missile barrage against U.S. forces in history at the Al-Assad and Erbil base in Syria. And then in June 2025, they responded to Trump's strikes on their nuclear program with ballistic missile strikes at a radome at the Al-Udeid air base. So it's highly likely that ballistic missile and long-range precision fires will be the core of how this regime is going to respond. I would also draw your attention to the fact that the Persian Gulf as a theater of potential conflict or for escalation has not really featured in the multiple cycles of violence we've seen since October 7 in the Middle East. And the chance for something to kick off there, I would say, is quite high, because you've had diplomatic, political, religious, and most importantly, military messaging out of Iran that if the U.S. strikes, that the Iranians would not hold back.
Behnam Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you for your insights again.
Thank you.